Welcome to the Strategic Briefing. Today, we are conducting a precise diagnostic audit of a sector that's undergoing a massive structural shift. We're looking directly at the energy MarTech stack, and specifically the strategic capital allocation required for the 2026 build versus buy architecture. Now, this explainer is built entirely on deep intelligence from Project 54. So if you're an executive in the capital-intensive energy sector, whether you're a utility, a renewable energy producer, or an oil and gas major, you'll want to listen closely, because by 2026, marketing technology is no longer just some localized departmental utility. It has rapidly evolved into a critical board-level enterprise asset. The architectural configuration of your stack literally dictates your institutional capability to manage digital transformation, regulatory compliance, and those really aggressive global decarbonization mandates. Let's kick things off with a hard metric that instantly clarifies the stakes here: 61%. Energy enterprises are right now dedicating a massive 61% of their technology portfolios specifically to digital advertising platforms. Now, you might be wondering, why such a huge allocation? Well, it's because the B2B energy purchasing path involves incredibly prolonged sales cycles and large, highly technical buying committees. These purchasers are executing a huge portion of their evaluation phase before they ever even speak to an account rep. So to maintain market visibility and actually capture that critical early-stage intent during those rep-free evaluations, your digital infrastructure is no longer optional. It is absolutely the front line of your revenue generation. Here is our engineering blueprint for today's briefing. We're going to cover MarTech as enterprise infrastructure, the MarTech integration deficit, NIS2 and data sovereignty risks, liabilities of proprietary engineering, composed architectures and integration, and finally, we'll wrap up with the capital allocation scorecard. Let's get right to work. All right, Section 1, MarTech as enterprise infrastructure. We really need to completely reframe how we view this software. The configuration of your MarTech stack is a structural baseline, one that directly dictates your corporate efficiency and your capacity to deploy complex decarbonization projects. And to do this properly, we have to look at what is essentially a mandatory balancing act. To efficiently manage those prolonged B2B sales cycles we just talked about, you have to align two very different environments. On one side, you have your systems of truth. This is your highly specialized technical industrial data, things like smart meter telemetry, SCADA system outputs, grid edge consumption metrics. And on the other side, you have your systems of context. That's your commercial pipeline analytics and marketing platforms. The goal is to perfectly align these systems, because if you don't, you suffer massive information fragmentation. You've got to be able to provide those highly technical buying committees with the structured, validated data they require for complex grid engineering, and you need to do it well before formal procurement even begins. Moving right into Section 2, the MarTech integration deficit. Achieving that alignment we just talked about is exactly where most organizations hit a wall. Let's look at the actual financial bleed caused by standard, off-the-shelf software models. The financial data is pretty shocking here, revealing that organizations fail to effectively utilize roughly 43.6% of their purchased marketing technology capabilities. Just think about that for a second. Nearly 44% of your capital allocation is completely stranded. It's basically the digital equivalent of buying an offshore rig and leaving half the drill bits in the warehouse. So why is this happening? It's because generic commercial off-the-shelf software simply lacks the native integrations for the specialized industrial data we just discussed. So instead of a streamlined system, your standard enterprise application portfolio fragments into these isolated information islands that totally fail to support commercial operations. Organizations try to fix this, of course, by purchasing supplementary apps or engineering temporary code patches, but that can cause SaaS expenses to absolutely skyrocket, pushing costs 150 to 200% beyond original vendor pricing. And the fallout from those failing patches? 37%. Integration challenges drive a massive 37% abandonment rate for these software deployments. Capital is just systematically lost to unproductive software maintenance and undecommissioned licenses. From a pure balance sheet perspective, these integration failures directly inflate your customer acquisition costs, they depress your EBITDA margins, and they drag down enterprise valuation multiples by actively lowering your overall capital efficiency. Which brings us to Section 3, NIS2 and data sovereignty risks. Okay, we need to shift our focus right now from financial waste to severe board-level legal threats, because regulatory frameworks in the energy sector are no longer just administrative checkboxes. They are active, strict operational constraints. Under the EU's NIS2 directive, cybersecurity and data protection are legally designated as executive management responsibilities. Look at the strict incident reporting timelines they enforce. You have a mandatory 24-hour early warning requirement, followed by a comprehensive 72-hour notification for significant disruptions. And listen, noncompliance isn't just a slap on the wrist here. For essential entities, penalties can reach up to 10 million euros or 2% of your total global annual revenue. And that's not even mentioning the potential personal liability for senior management. This stark contrast right here brilliantly illustrates the geopolitical minefield that enterprise leaders are trying to navigate today. You've got a direct jurisdictional conflict. On one side, the U.S. Cloud Act mandates data disclosure to U.S. federal authorities upon legal request, completely regardless of where that data is physically stored. But on the other side, you have NIS2 and GDPR enforcing strict data sovereignty and localization. Now, a significant portion of market-leading enterprise marketing software is owned by U.S.-based organizations. So the crucial takeaway is this. If you're an energy major managing critical national infrastructure, routing your data through non-compliant U.S.-based software risks absolutely catastrophic regulatory fines. It can even elevate your weighted average cost of capital as debt and insurance markets start pricing in your regulatory volatility. Let's look at Section 4, Liabilities of Proprietary Engineering. So to avoid these severe integration limits and those massive sovereignty risks, organizations do something pretty predictable. They pivot to building their own solutions in-house. But let's expose the hidden technical debt of that exact strategy. Building industrial data infrastructure requires highly specialized engineering talent, and let's anchor this in hard numbers. The fully burdened corporate cost for just one qualified internal software engineer ranges from $150,000 to $200,000 annually. When you start diverting this internal engineering capital to build and maintain commodity platforms, you're creating a massive opportunity cost, and you're significantly slowing down development for your core revenue-generating energy products. Take a look at the real total cost of ownership on a typical custom build. You might have an initial development outlay of, say, $500,000. But the harsh reality of proprietary software is the recurring annual maintenance, the security updates, API adjustments, the bug fixes. All of that reliably costs 15 to 20% of your initial outlay. That is $75,000 to $100,000 every single year. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, AI and vibe coding are lowering the barriers to entry. And yeah, you're right. They do decrease the initial capital required, but they do absolutely nothing to reduce that recurring 15 to 20% maintenance drag. In fact, automated code generation often introduces undocumented complexity, which, guess what, requires highly compensated human engineers to fix later on. All right, Section 5, Composed Architectures and Integration. So, if commercial software bleeds capital through lack of integration and custom builds drain resources through technical debt, what exactly is the architectural fix? Well, this process flow reveals the blueprint. To resolve the IT and operational technology divide without relying on brittle custom code, and to neutralize that NIS2 liability, operators must deploy a decoupled data architecture using domain-specific integration middleware, like an industrial data hub. Step 1, you ingest your operational grid data securely. Step 2, you strictly anonymize and tokenize all personally identifiable information on-premise or within a sovereign cloud system of truth. And finally, Step 3, you only transfer those anonymized hashes to the external, non-sovereign commercial platforms. This entirely shields executive leadership from regulatory liability by ensuring third-party marketing applications never process your raw, sensitive grid or customer data. And we have the empirical evidence to prove that this hybrid blending strategy works. Capital-efficient operators are retaining commercial SaaS for commodity tasks, and they are reserving their proprietary engineering exclusively for high-margin market differentiators. Look at Equinor. They engineered the Omnia data platform to securely eliminate data silos across production units. Vattenfall deployed identity resolution via anonymized records, which drastically democratized safe data access and reduced their proof-of-concept timelines, speeding up business value extraction by up to 81%. And Shell is utilizing specialized custom AI models for carbon capture prediction, achieving an operational speedup of 100,000 times over traditional simulators. They aren't building CRM systems from scratch, right? They're engineering market separation. Finally, Section 6, the Capital Allocation Scorecard. This right here is a highly operational takeaway asset for technology procurement leaders who really need to enforce discipline. Subjective procurement processes routinely lead to duplicate software and integration failures. Utilizing a quantitative framework like this build versus buy weighted matrix minimizes that subjectivity. You evaluate decision variables like, is this a core differentiator? What is the regulatory risk? And what is the time to market urgency? For example, custom execution is only justified if the feature directly defines a competitive advantage or if strict data sovereignty requires it to mitigate NIS2 exposure. But if you need revenue generation within a 6-month window, commercial SaaS models heavily outweigh a custom build. Using this matrix structurally eliminates the risk of bad capital allocation. I want to leave you with one final, absolutely critical challenge: to audit your own infrastructure today. Based on everything we've broken down, from the 37% integration abandonment rates all the way to those €10 million NIS2 penalties, you have to ask yourself, is your current marketing technology stack an engineered enterprise asset, or is it a structural compliance liability? Because the architecture you choose today dictates your operational velocity tomorrow. Thank you for joining this explainer, Project 54, Revenue Architecture Engineered.